Moving right into the agenda with reports with our Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Michael Brooks.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming out. We've got a few wonderful things on our agenda tonight with Students of the Month here and the reflections with our PTA group, and a personnel matter that means quite a bit to us as a system and also as an individual, where the Board of Education will be taking action on a tenure for a teacher tonight. Additionally, I'd like to update the board on just a few things. Mr. Bakatis is going to give a little status update when he returns from getting some stuff for our gathering regarding the security audit that we are undertaking. So I'll let him speak to that. If he doesn't get back in time, I'll speak to some of the details. Also want to brief the board that at the next meeting, I'm going to ask the board to approve a class trip, the senior class trip for the spring of 2019. So yes, we are fully in the mode of planning for the 18-19 school year at this point. And I kind of reflect on about a year ago where we had a visit from some seniors that spent some time talking with us and convincing us, right, Bella, about the benefits of such an excursion. So we'll be bringing that experience to our Board of Education at the next meeting for the spring of 2019 for the current juniors, next year seniors. We're also working on a visit from the bus company and the ownership of the bus company as requested by the Board of Education. We're hopeful that that presentation for the board will be on the June 28th board meeting, so that'll be coming up soon. You know what, why don't we do that quick little demonstration? I watched a demonstration, or some training actually, that was going on at our middle school. You know, coding, programming, computer programming, they call it coding now, is happening all over the place in our elementaries, our middles, and our high school students' classes. And another neat piece of technology, obviously, at this point is drone technology. So you see a lot of drone video going on all over the place. Even news agencies are starting to use drone technology. I think there's a lot of drone photography going on around the volcano in Hawaii too. Incredible pictures. So our middle school technology classes actually are combining coding and drone technology, and I watched with someone with their mobile phone code the movement of a drone right in a classroom. And actually we have two of our staff from the middle school here that are going to give the board a quick demonstration, Mr. Morallo and Ms. Weiss, who will show us a little bit about what drone technology is so that we can get a sense as a board and certainly as a public what our children are going to be doing in the middle school with programming, coding, and drone technology. So maybe you can give a little primer on it and a little demo, please.
Certainly. Good evening, everyone. Mrs. Weiss and I are very excited to be demonstrating a drone that we've recently acquired in the middle school. I'll give you a real brief background. A couple months ago, our 6th grade went to Stewart Airport for the annual Y2 Kids field trip. And while there, one of our 6th grade math teachers, Kathy Keene, submitted for a raffle for this drone, and lo and behold, we won it. So now we have this drone, and through Orange Ulster BOCES, we've had a trainer come out to the school once with Courtney Krause, our technology teacher. So he has trained her, he's trained some of our students, and we're looking forward to some additional training in order to learn how to use the drone. We know some basics, but now we're really looking forward to like some curriculum applications. This afternoon, Mrs. Weiss and I, we practiced with it ourselves. We were in the media center. There were some kids staying after school. It was funny, one by one, it was like, you know, flies coming. All of a sudden, they just kind of hovered around us. And the kids were like, oh, my dad has this, or I have one, or I know how to do that. So I'm handing them my phone. They're coding it. It's doing all different types of things. So our students are really in tune with this type of technology, and it truly engages them. So I'm really excited to see what we can do with this in the future. Because we were also looking online, and they have lessons pre-made for like trigonometry and Pythagorean theorem and lots of different things that we can code this to really connect to the curriculum. So that's really something that's very exciting that we're looking forward to. So without further ado, I will demonstrate it for you. I was joking with Sue. I said I've had so many times over the past 2 years where I go to demonstrate something, and it's like it knows when people are watching it, and then it decides it wants to do its own thing, but we're going to keep our fingers crossed. There we go. And what's nice about the program, it works with Android or iOS tablet or smartphone. It's blockly coding, which for students is nice because it's basically just taking blocks of individual code and snapping them together. So students don't have to know the real technical computer science. They're learning about it through this, but it really makes it accessible to kids of all ages. Because through the Hour of Code that's hosted by code.org in December, we've had pretty much all of our students participate in some form of coding tutorial, and it all uses blockly coding. So a lot of our kids, they're going to be able to jump right into this and really have a good idea of what they're doing.
You know, an interesting element to all of it, certainly it's neat and flashy when you see something like that, and a pilot that knows really how to control a drone could certainly do things like that. But this is all programmed, so really students are learning about algorithms and logic as they're doing this. So while it's neat to see, oh, we can play with this on a phone or on a tablet and watch how this goes, the mind is developing those skills, algorithms and logic, and those are fantastic skills for the future. Basically, you look at something like this, and if there's a task that can have an algorithm attached to it, the computer's going to do it. And there's where it is right there. So I think recently you've seen an awful lot more with car sharing technologies where you have Lyft and you have Uber. Now you're starting to hear Uber thinking about getting into plane sharing and driverless technology. So you can see how something like that can happen. Obviously there's a lot of detail that needs to be worked through, but quite a cutting edge area. So thank you very much.
No problem. You're welcome. Thank you.
Perfect timing. Mr. Bakatsias, would you be able to give a brief update on where we are with the security audit?
Yes. Sorry about that. Last week, the security firm Altiris was in district. Over a 3-day period, they visited each building. That began in each building with an interview of those teams that really oversee safety there. So that included the building principals, the SROs assigned to that building, Mr. Cavaza, because it is also a facilities review. And so that was a very comprehensive discussion. Then we did a walkthrough, very thorough walkthrough of the building, looking at all kinds of systems. The consultant spoke with staff, interviewed staff, asked questions, and that happened throughout the district. So at this point, they've collected a large quantity of data, and they will now prepare reports to the superintendent and the Board of Education that looks very critically at our safety systems, and it's a very broad perspective. They checked a lot of the same things that the fire department does or our safety inspectors do that give us occupancy. So those kinds of building systems. But it also looked at emergency responses, active shooter responses, and a variety of other safety areas. I was told to expect that not before June 1st, but we'll follow up in the days ahead to see if they've targeted when we would receive that. We did tell them that we would like to receive that towards the end of the year so we could carry those into administrative discussions over the summer. And you know, if there's changes we need to make, we'd like to do that prior to September. So that's the update.
Does anybody have any questions regarding that? Okay. That's all I have to report.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is our student representative report with Ms. Isabella Martinez.
Well, starting with the elementary school, the spring concert will be held on May 21st. The elementary school's PTA provided a teacher appreciation luncheon on May 9th. The district-wide E&L Family Fun Night was held today, May 17th, and the school received new BBot tech that is supposed to be used to help students understand coding, which is kind of what we just saw. Moving on to the middle school, the 6th grade went to Liberty Science Center last week, and the other half is going next week. The SWAT breakfast recognized 18 students the last week with Officer Fulton as the keynote speaker. Tomorrow is an Olveus class meeting with a Red Nose Day theme to bring awareness to poverty. The MMS just received a drone that was used during the 6th grade field trip at the Stewart Air Base for Y2 kids. The 8th grade trip is happening next week, beginning on Tuesday. It's a 2-night trip to Washington, D.C., and the 7th grade trip is one long day on June 1st. And there is a combined concert on June 6th and National Junior Honor Society induction on June 11th. And then lastly, at the high school, prom was held on May 4th at West Point. Memorial Day tea was held today, May 17th. The mixed choir and chamber choir went to NYSSMA Majors competition on May 14th and received a bronze and silver respectively. The concert band and wind ensemble went to NYSSMA Majors competition today and received a silver and a gold respectively. And then AP exams took place this past week, and students sat down to take college-level exams in subjects varying from world history to statistics. And the art students took a trip to visit the Museum of Modern Art on May 14th. And that's it.
Thank you very much. And moving on to our much anticipated Student of the Month, we will turn it back to Mr. Brooks to introduce the schools.
Well, thank you very much. Let's start with the middle school.
Good evening. It's always a pleasure to be here, and so nice to see such a wonderful crowd and so many wonderful students, some of them who will be joining us next year at the middle school. I met some of our incoming students. We're very excited. This month, our Student of the Month is represented from the fact that it is National Physical Fitness Month, and so we select our student from the PE department, and here to present our Student of the Month is Ms. Lipsy, and it is my great honor to recognize Katerina Calderon, our middle school Student of the Month. Come on up.
Good evening, Board of Education, Superintendent of Schools, Mr. Brooks, and of course, Mrs. Mealy, Mrs. Heck, Mr. Woodrow, Mr. Bacachis, and everybody up there, faculty, family, friends, everybody that's here, welcome. So I am just so honored and privileged to have Katerina stand next to me. Mr. Monroe could not be here today, but he does send his best wishes. He just wanted to be here, but he just had another appointment, so he just wanted me to make sure I portrayed that. So what we both came up with, there's so many things about Katerina. She's such a beautiful girl. Katerina is an exemplary physical education student. Katerina is punctual, prepared, and always participates in class. She leads by example and puts teamwork and sportsmanship first. Katerina knows how to communicate with her classmates and will lend a helping hand when needed. It has been a pleasure teaching Katerina these past 2 years, and that was from Mr. Monroe. But I've had the pleasure also of having Katerina as a 6th grade student, as well as she also played basketball for me as a modified 7th grader. So I've had the pleasure of knowing Katerina since 6th grade, and she had 100% excellence ever since I've known her. Mr. Monroe and I so appreciate you, Katerina, for making a difference in physical education because of your unique characteristics. Katerina, we admire your great attitude, your kindness, your warmness and heart, your willingness to lead a helping hand, your respect for adults and peers, your trustworthiness, your caring for people, your honesty, your selflessness. You're a great listener, you're responsible, you're courteous, and you're always prepared and ready to go. And we know that you are a stellar student and you are an amazing role model. So we thank you, Katerina, for the person you are. And I also want to thank your mom and dad and your family, your extended family, because they raised an amazing girl. And I know when I was teaching so many years ago, I had Katerina's mom in class, and she is a duplicate of Katerina. So I so appreciate that so much. And I also asked a couple of her teachers to write a little blurb on Katerina. So this is from a teacher. I'm sure you'll recognize it. Katerina is kind-hearted, hardworking, and she's an excellent participant, always respectful, and she brings a level of seriousness to her academics that benefits all those around her. It's been a joy to have her in Spanish class, and that's from Mr. Murphy. And then one other one. Katerina is an exceptional student with great work ethics. She strives for excellence with everything she does. Katerina is a role model to her peers as she completes all her tasks to her potential and a polite student and always has a smile on her face. Katerina is a student that her teachers always look forward to seeing every single day. And we thank you for that. Thank you.
Mr. Lawler, would you present the high school student of the month, please?
Good evening. Mrs. Walsh and I didn't know which direction you were going back there. So I actually want to take a moment to invite up Mr. Gray, a math teacher in our building, and also Kevin Middow, our student of the month. Come on up, Kevin. Congratulations. Before I turn the microphone over to Mr. Gray, I'll just tell you that Kevin is a 9th grade student. He's excelling in our program at school. He's incredibly engaged. When you talk to Kevin in our school, when you observe him, whether he's riling up a crowd, a soccer crowd, which I've seen him do to support fellow students in the building, or whether he's engaged in learning in classes, he's really, his 100% in the moment, paying attention, really adding to the flavor of the class. So it's a real pleasure to have you in our building. You have a bright future, and I'm very glad you're with us. Mr. Gray?
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I went around to a bunch of teachers today that Kevin has, and we all pretty much had the same message, which Kevin's energy as a student is so welcoming. To one, as a math teacher, to have someone awake in my class is fantastic. But not only is Kevin awake, he is smiling, he's participating, he always has his homework done, and he's always asking questions and constantly learning. Thank you so much for that. Everyone else is awake. I was just kidding about the sleeping thing. But in other courses,
of the month, I just want to say a couple things myself about Christopher DiNatale, who is a very special young man. And I was listening to Mr. Gray speak, and I was awake, Mr. Gray. And Christopher is emulating a lot of the characteristics that Kevin, who's in high school, emulates. Christopher is a leader. He's very loving and caring, and Christopher has been a go-to person for me. So if there is a little bit of a problem on the playground, sometimes I've been able to go to him and say, we do have, someone who's not feeling included. I need you to be that man who can step up and to make sure that they feel included. One way to share with you how special he is this is the largest cheering section of family that I've ever seen. We've got 3 rows at least of Christopher DiNatale people and people across there. His best friend Sammy's across the gym. His teacher Mrs. Canino's here. His principal's always here. Christopher came tonight with his Milton Elementary School alum pin. He came to kindergarten here at Milton Elementary School, and he still holds that in his heart, as we all do. And I am now going to call up my amazing physical education teachers who nominated Christopher. And I forgot one person, Mr. Cavaza, our substitute hall monitor, substitute teacher, substitute jack of all trades, is also here to laud Christopher because he is so special. So I am now going to stop and introduce my amazing PE teachers, Mrs. Palumbo, Mrs. Young, and Mr. Becker. Thank you. Christopher, too.
Good evening, everyone. The Physical Education Department has chosen Christopher to receive the May Student of the Month Award. when myself, Ms. Palumbo, and Mr. Becker sat down to discuss who would receive Student of the Month, Christopher instantaneously stuck out. Christopher is always prepared for class, and he's so prepared that once he gets off the bus or his parents drop him off, he stops by the gym to check in the gym to see what we're playing for the day so he can share it with his classmates. Christopher is a very motivated child. He's knowledgeable about all the sports we play in class, and most importantly, he gets along with all his classmates. What impresses us most about Christopher is his willingness to help others and his modesty. He is also willing to give a helping hand to teachers or anyone in class who may be having a difficult time learning a certain skill. Christopher is a positive leader who sets great examples for his classmates, but also for the younger students who look up to him. Christopher is always positive, gives 110% in whatever sport we do, and shows great sportsmanship while playing hard. We all appreciate his superior efforts to be respectful at all times, responsible, and successful in something that all of us hold so dear to our hearts. We also want to thank Mr. and Mrs. Dintal for raising such a wonderful young man. So please help me congratulate Christopher on this well-deserved award that he receives tonight. We're so proud of you, and congratulations.
You know, in case you weren't paying attention, when you hear things about Marlboro Dukes and you hear words like punctual and prepared, leading by example, 100% in the moment, they're helpful, their smile lifts up the class, 100% excellence comes from them all the time. They're unique, amazing role models, they're motivated, they have the largest cheer section. This makes me proud to be part of what we have here. Marlboro is a great place, and these people are examples of what Marlboro is all about every day. So moms, dads, families, grandmas, grandpas, aunts, uncles, cousins, I don't know how large the cheering section is, but all of you in the front, in the back, in the sides, thank you so much for raising great kids. Thank you for sending this to us every single day, and thank you, kids, for being such great Dukes. We really appreciate it.
To conclude with our reports, I would like to welcome Mrs. Christy Bogacek to present the reflection winners from the Marlboro Elementary School.
Good evening, everyone. This is Faith Nanini. She's our PTA president at MES, and we're both really happy to be able to be here for the 5th year, representing the PTA and recognizing our Reflections winners. So just to give you a little background, Reflections is a nationally recognized program of the PTA that encourages students to express themselves artistically. So it goes outside of the academics of classroom, and instead it focuses on the arts. Children can create choreography or take pictures. They can create visual arts or write poetry. It's just a way of for children to express themselves in a different medium that moves outside of sports, that moves outside of academics. So we're very happy to recognize the children this evening. Each of their submissions, which some of them will have to show you this evening, were sent out of district for an independent panel of judges. So I'd like to thank Corey Appler, who each year has helped me for the past 5 years in obtaining a panel of judges, which is actually out of county for us, so that it's impartial and all of the submissions can be looked at equally. So without further ado, I would love to recognize our students. If you have your artwork with you, students, please make sure you bring it up so everybody can see it and recognize it. Some of our friends have written poetry or literature, so they'll have theirs up, but you won't necessarily get to see it as well. We're going to start with a really special student. Her name is Adeline Appler, and she's being recognized for 2 winning submissions this year. She not only won for primary visual arts, but she also won for primary photography. So come on up, Adeline. Our next winner is also primary visual arts, and it's Ellie Bogacek. The primary division is grades K through 2. So you'll also hear intermediate visual arts. Intermediate levels are those children in grades 3 through 5. So I'd like to now recognize Mia Russo for intermediate visual arts. Emma Stobling for intermediate visual arts. Emma Bogacek for intermediate literature. Emma Lapola for intermediate literature. Gabe Appler for intermediate photography. Mia Verdi for intermediate photography. And Gianna Pascaluccio for musical composition. Congratulations to all of our winners, and keep being artistic and expressing yourselves. We love it.
I just want to thank Christy. She started this program in our school 5 years ago, and she's continued carrying it through for the last 5 years, so thank you.
Moving forward on the agenda, we will go to number 3, public comment on agenda items. We welcome public comment on any of the agenda items. Moving on to the consent agenda. Resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, approve the following contracts, agreements, and reports as presented. Personnel recommendations, CSE, CPSE report, Four Winds Hospital Contract, Attorney Contract, Monroe Woodbury CSD Health and Welfare Contract, Financial Reports for April, Backpack Program Donation, Unofficial Board Meeting Minutes from May 3rd, 2018, and Textbook Adoption. Can I get a motion to approve the contracts as presented? Joanne, second. Frank? Any discussion? I had a discussion, or a question for Mr. Witherow regarding the financial reports. I believe page 8 on the budget status report. Give me a second, I'm just trying to get to it. In regards to the tuition, private tuition, students, programs for students with disabilities, I see certain amount of appropriated funds versus that of what has been used up until this point. Is it just generally because those contracts are not due to be paid?
Which item specifically? Do you have the budget account number?
I think page 8. Yes. You see it on page 8?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was trying to scroll through there while you said specifically what it was.
2250, 470.
2250, 470?
Yes.
You're talking about the unencumbered balance of 212,000?
I believe appropriated amount is like 1.14 million, and what we've used is 536,000. Just curious, at this point in the year, is it just because that?
We still have 394,000 in encumbrances outstanding.
I see, okay.
And right now, we're looking at an unencumbered balance of about $212,000.
Okay.
So there's still billing that will take place between now and the end of the year.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the consent agenda? Okay, you can cast your vote. The motion has been carried 5-0. Moving on to number 5, recommended actions. Resolved that the Board of Education authorizes the Superintendent of Schools to sign the Memorandum of Agreement with the Marlborough Faculty Association dated May 2018 as presented. Can I get a motion to authorize the signature of the MOA? Joanne, second. Frank? Any discussion? Can we just briefly talk about the potential of the savings?
Yes, economically, this could be a major cost saver for the school district. Certainly, we always get concerned regarding the loss of very talented, experienced teachers in an incentive. However, there also is an economic benefit to incentivizing someone to retire and then replace that person with a lower paid employee at the beginning of their career. So we're anticipating, depending upon how many people actually take the incentive, tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of savings over the next 5-year period. Mr. Witherow's done a pretty detailed extrapolation depending upon who actually does retire and then the replacements that take over. A substantial savings to the school district if this goes through. So,
thank you. Any discussion on that? No. Cast your vote. The motion has been carried 5-0. Moving on to old business. Is there any old business that the board would like to discuss?
I know last year we talked about the flags at the high school, especially the Marlboro Dukes flags. Again, it's faded, it's ripped, especially with graduation coming up. Can we please look into that and check all the flags on all our buildings to make sure, especially with Memorial Day coming?
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. The orange, you talking about the orange Duke flag?
Yes,
It's
it's
actually
been-
kind of the color that it comes, so it hasn't faded. It's a faded orange originally, but I'll have Larry take a look at
Yeah,
it
I
again.
mean, because it's
That-
like a little
that-
orange and then it's a little
That
lighter
flag
orange.
has already been reordered for the Marlboro Dukes flag.
It's already been reordered.
Because I know we ordered it last year and I haven't seen it really, you know. And just check to all the flags on all the buildings, please.
I've
to
already-
Make sure they're not ripped.
I've talked with Mr. Cavazza about that, and he's going to go through and check all of the American flags and all the flags at all the buildings.
Thank you.
I had one item. Last meeting, Pat was going to come back to us with a number that stated where we are with our actual expenses compared to the budget for the year. So he nodded to me, so he knows.
Well, what I have for you is a projection on where we're going to finish
Yes,
at the end
of
of the year.
course.
So originally, we had budgeted a budgeted loss of $3,758,926. That's our appropriated fund balance that we had allocated. Included in that is the 4% contingency money that we budget for unexpected expenditures, which was about $2.2 million. So we expected to actually run a loss of $1,558,926. So about $1.56 million was what we were expecting to run as an operating loss. Right now, we currently expect our operating loss to be $2,495,968. So that's an increase in the expected loss of $937,000, mostly attributed to the $1.2 million shortfall from the town of Newburgh. We actually are expecting to do a little bit better in a couple other areas that'll, offset about $300,000 of that. So instead of that difference being, the $1.2 million added to the expected, it's about $937,000 added. So, and these are just right now my best estimate. So I anticipate expenses to run about $52,395,000 and anticipated revenue about $49.9 million.
So I didn't follow that, Pat. When you were calling it a loss, so you allocate a certain amount of money that's going to go back into the fund balance, right? So of that money, that's the 3.7 you were talking about?
Well, the 3.758 is that's the amount of money that we needed to appropriate from our fund balance
Right.
to balance our budget.
Right.
But of that 3.7, 2.2 of it is contingent funds, so that's the 4%. So we budget at expected 96% of expenditures. So that 2.2 million we were expecting we would not actually lose, that money would get put back into reserves. So we were expecting to only, at the end of the day, run a loss of 1.56 million.
As opposed to 2.2 million?
As opposed to 3.76, which is what we originally appropriated as a loss. So we appropriated 3.76. We expected to lose 1.56, and right now, with the loss of the 1.2 million in revenue from the town of Newburgh, we're expecting to lose 2.49.
So we're overrunning our loss, our expected loss.
Correct, because we would expect if all things were equal that we'd overrun our loss by 1.2 million, because that was a direct shortfall of revenue.
So we're really $300,000 better than
where we
expected.
Correct,
Because
given the circumstances.
we're not getting that 1.2 in we
Correct.
expected to get. We're only really losing an extra 900,000.
Correct.
So the 1.5 is inclusive of the $1.2 million, right? And
the 1.5 is, if we had received the 1.2 million from Newburgh, we would have expected to lose the 1.56.
Okay. And that's not inclusive of the 2.2 that goes back into.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Any other old business? Any new business?
I had some parents call and ask me some questions about the storm that had happened. One was, we didn't cancel school. children couldn't get to school, especially in the Middle Hope and Middle Hope and Newburgh area, especially down by Carter Avenue on the other side of Mary Jane's. There were trees down. And one of the biggest questions were, and I'm kind of curious, is why we didn't close school? It wasn't, it's not privileged that some kids get to come, we don't go. We had time, we should have shut the schools down. People were out of water. We should have at least opened the buildings for people to come and get some water or something. And then the buses weren't running. They couldn't get up the hills. They couldn't get past anything. And again, parents got notified late. Again, so for me, schools should have been shut down. The buses shouldn't have ran. We notified everybody very late. So for the next, God forbid we ever have to go through this again, I think we really need to consider this and figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. Because I have to tell you, I tried after that night that we left for the elections, I had to go down Carter Avenue. And I got to tell you, parents, trees were down in front of driveways, wires are down, and here we are, we're going to send a bunch of kids to school. This side of town was fine. The other side, it really looked like a bomb went off, and it still does. There are many of our students without power, water. So I really am a little disappointed the way this was handled.
I can speak to that. Obviously, it's my decision. Schools needed to be open, which is why I kept them open. There absolutely were some areas of Middle Hope that were devastated. There were some very difficult conditions. I directed all of our principals to have a very liberal leave policy when it comes to lateness and absences. So if someone is delayed or absent because of the storm, it doesn't count against them. The safest place for our children the last 2 days, especially for homes that don't have power, is in our schools. Schools were fully powered. We have food. We have heat. If it was really hot, we would have had air conditioning. It would have been the most comfortable environment. Plus, those kids could have been out of mom's and dad's hands so they could work on storm cleanup.
And
So
I get
we absolutely worked very closely with our bus company. We were understanding very early in the morning that the bus company was cautious about some of the conditions down in Middle Hope. As a matter of fact, the bus company had some major power problems themselves, so they had some communications issues. Mr. Witherow is putting together a contingency plan. Each time you experience a new experience, you come up with new plans. So we've never had a complete communications outage with our transportation company. So they are coming up with a contingency plan for making communication for folks simpler. But we had pretty good attendance on Tuesday and Wednesday. Obviously, some of that slacked a little bit in the area of Middle Hope. And we also had some high-stakes testing taking place at the high school that we also wanted to make sure that we did our best effort to get those kids in for. So I respectfully understand what you're saying fully. I will absolutely, as I had spoken with a number of parents, take that into consideration when I make the decision, but that's what went into my thought process. So,
but the
no,
thing
not
is,
for a
if they-
debate,
if
just
they'll-
for,
right.
I
But
gave you my
These are the
explanation.
students that could not get out of their houses, could
Correct.
not get down that road, so they didn't have water, they didn't have, so when we opened the school, it was basically for Marlboro and Milton. They had all the power, these kids couldn't get out, they couldn't get buses up and down those roads at all. Even going up Latin Town, I have to tell you, it was hard. Going up Holmes Road, even where I am, Frozen Ridge Road, the whole place up on that side of Newburgh, I have to tell you, Frozen Ridge Road, if it wasn't open this afternoon, it still hasn't been open. Power is just starting to come on. And again, these kids, it would have been better off to open the school for water. Parents are looking for ice, they're looking for water, they're looking to get their kids baths, it's just something. But some of them couldn't even get out of the house.
Central Hudson, I believe the Red Cross supported it, but also the town of Newburgh supported that facility down at Middle Hope Fire Department.
And do you know how fast that ice went?
I don't.
I have to tell you, there was a long line for that, so.
I'm upset for those families too. That area of Newburgh and Middle Hope was very badly damaged. So I
Bonneville,
Hey, Mike.
it's well horrible.
I guess the main consideration of that is if there were children who couldn't make it, that they could have missed a couple of days of instruction. and where others did it. So is there any accommodations being made for help those who in fact could not come? And
Absolutely, yeah. Teachers have a responsibility to make up work with children, whether it's extra time, whether it's extra effort, absolutely, so yes. Yep. And that's regardless of disaster like that.
Yeah.
Absences are legal absences that we need to make up for when children are out.
yeah, I mean, one thing I know is just watching my own children and other kids in our neighborhood at different schedules, high school and middle school go first. It appeared that buses really didn't know where the roads were blocked yet because that communication hadn't gone out really in the community, right? There was so much and so much down that nobody really knew how bad it was in some respects until the next day when everybody tried to get out, right? I mean, not to make excuses or anything, but I think that's a part of it, right? The early bus went out, all of a sudden the buses couldn't get through, so then the communications from the school went out and said, hey, the buses are changed. At least that's what it appeared to us as parents on our street.
It's a good interpretation of it. I think there was a debate about getting that message out and a discussion about the timing of it, and I think that that's something that we'll look to in the future as to how and when or if that message should go out the way it did. The purpose for that message was because of the communication delay from the transportation company. Typically, right now, when there's a delay for any bus, the transportation company contacts all of the families on that bus directly. So we don't need to put out a mass call. But because there was a difficulty with, them being able to turn on their computers, we figured let's put out a mass message that we can at least get something saying, hey, there's going to be some delays.
And Quality actually lost phones in Port Jervis, Chester, and Goshen, and then their Newburgh site was no phones or power, so it wasn't even like we could have rerouted through another terminal.
Right, but that was my point, Pat. Everything went out so late. At that point, we should have made the decision, maybe we should have closed. But my other concern is there a way, I know years ago we looked at making, when the high school was finished, making it like a Red Cross emergency center. Is there a way that, especially because this has happened, I mean, it's been...
Ms. Reed, any of our schools would be used as a Red Cross center if the Red Cross ever requested it. We would immediately shut down, and that would become that kind of a center. That request did not come in.
Right, but they have to deem them. This is something that we talked about.
No, they can use our facilities.
We went through that the
for
last time,
any
and
purpose.
we were told
The fire
years ago.
department or the emergency management for each individual county knows where all the public facilities are, and based on the specific instance and problem, they work with the landowner at that time if they need to use them, whether it's for shelter because of warming centers or cooling centers. Schools are always, when school's in session, the last option, but they're still there and used. We use them in all the counties around here. You see that happening, but
I know when we finished the high school, when it was redone, they were going to make it an emergency center. And we were told there was a couple of factors that was missing. So I'm just going back to what I know, what I was told.
yeah, but that becomes a fact of whether or not your generator that you have can run the whole building, all your HVACs.
That's what I'm saying.
Our generators don't, not all of them, have the ability to run all of those utilities. But it depends on at what level you get to if they need that. And that's not something for us. That's something for the county emergency managers and the fire department who coordinate those things with the Red Cross and the other emergency responders.
But we had power on this side. That's all I'm saying is there a way to look at it and let the Red Cross know that if we do have power that we're willing to help?
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Any other new business? Any other items?
Yes, I have one. I have to at this time ask for a public apology from Ms. Reed for accusing myself, Mr. Morrow, and Mr. Perugino of stealing your signs. Publicly, you did that to us, and I would at this time ask that you publicly here in a public forum apologize when none of us stole anything.
You know what? And I think that goes also for you, Frank, and Tony, and John, for what you've done. Even on Tony, went on Facebook and also accused me of a lot of things. and things that have not happened, and things that you've all said. So, I mean, my signs were stolen, and I didn't exactly accuse you of stealing the signs.
The Post says, 3 men are clearly threatened by my candidacy, and they have to steal signs from a single woman between the 3 of them, and then it goes into how much you believe we make combined.
Whatever.
That's a specific accusation. I'm a public official outside of here also, and I believe that unless you have proof, you should publicly apologize to us in a public forum for something that we did not do. And if you refuse to, that's fine, but I just think it's
Well,
wrong.
and that goes also the other way.
What
because-
did we publicly say?
Tony, what did you publicly do that you allowed everybody to continually bully me on your Facebook? Constantly.
The question was,
A-
what
and-
did we do?
If you give me the
Well, it was
accusation,
someone
I'll...
that apparently, because my signs were stolen, taken down, thrown in the street, run over, and you know what, I will put, maybe you didn't do it, maybe Tony didn't do it, or John, but it was someone who definitely wanted you, that it went around and did that, okay? But
fine.
now, I don't see where, you guys
Trustees.
went on Facebook and
Trustees.
bullied me with a lot of people right here,
And-
and you all allowed it.
In
So,
all
that's
due
fine.
in all due respect,
And you continually
we
bully
can
me.
we can have
And you
board
justified that,
we
Frank.
can have board relation discussions in executive session. We do have other items to celebrate, and one is we have a teacher here who has just received tenure status, and we would like to congratulate her for her very hard work. She, from my perspective, from my experience, is an excellent teacher, and this district is truly blessed to have her be a part of it. So thank you very much. And before we move to the recognition of district residents, I'm sure Mr. Brooks would like to say something, but I wanted everyone to know that we will be celebrating your accomplishment before we go into executive session, if the board so chooses to go into executive session. We're eating
We're
cake.
celebrating either way.
Ms. Bogacek, yes, let's congratulate Mia. She's the one, I'm telling you. Love her. You know, you don't know this, but you've had an impression on me from the beginning. You and I have had a lot of very intense professional talks about some pretty neat things when it comes to teaching and learning. And that's helped me grow. And I know that the intent was always to help yourself grow in your practice, because that's how you reflect after every lesson that I've observed in you. Whether it was in a substitute, leave, or now probationary position and finishing off with your tenure, you're impressive. You're an impressive person, you're an impressive teacher, and I really, truly appreciate the reflective way you look at teaching and learning. And I've grown from our conversations too, Christy, so thank you very much for being such a great person to our kids.
Are there any other items before the board? This time I would like to recognize district residents. We do have an executive session scheduled for the purpose of reviewing the employment history of a particular person and for the purpose and discussion regarding the proposal, sale, lease, and acquisition of real property, as well as proposed, pending, or current litigation. Can I get a motion to go into executive session?
Okay, okay, okay.
You have to, I would,
I thought, yeah.
yeah.
We can. Yeah.
Yes, I think, yeah,
we
yeah.
can.
Even though he's not running, he has to be invited.
Also, adding to that, we have a newly elected board member who will be starting with us in July at the reorganizational meeting. And as a courtesy to all new board members, we invite them into executive session in order to bring them up to speed with business affairs. So we would like the public to know that we have, as a board, agreed and invited Mr. Marrow into our executive session. Can I get a motion to go into executive session? John, second. Tony? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No business after. We will entering into executive session after cake at 8:30.